Okay, it is now 12:30. I'd like to welcome you all this week to um, our latest edition of the Belonging series, and it's Imperial as One's series where we look at exploring the BAME experiences and to determine how they influence and how they help us to understand the general experiences which we have. And this week, I'm really excited to tell you that we've got Yani King. Now, originally, I had put that she was a former a former co-chair of Imperial was one, but it just didn't sit right with me to say former co-chair. So she is a co-chair of Imperial as One. Once you're in with Imperial as One, you're always in with Imperial as One. So Yani, I know we're going to have a fantastic discussion. Can you just give us, as I'd normally say, can you give us a little bit of a background to yourself, what it is that you've, which makes you you, okay? A bit of your motivations that's led you to be where you are right now.
That is a very difficult question because it's also like asking the question of where you're from or where you're from. And I never know how to answer this.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the question of where you're from or where you're from,
Mm-hmm.
I always like to take power back in that. And I always say to people, guess. Because when people ask that where you're from or where you're from, they're actually they're trying to, it's a microaggression of trying to belittle you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're take that power back and say, guess, you're the person in power and you make the person feel a little bit, less adequate. And they're like, oh, I'm the idiot because I just tried to put you in a box to understand you. So I always try to challenge that idea. But in this context, I'm happy to share where I'm from. So people get really confused when they see my face and like, where I don't understand what's going on here. So for me, I'm half British, I'm half Indonesian, and part of my identity comes from living around the world. So I've lived in Abu Dhabi, and then I lived there until I was 6. And I also lived in Aberdeen. And when I did my year abroad at uni, I lived in Japan, in Kyoto. And that's influenced me a lot because of at which stages in life I've really explored my own identity. And what I've experienced in different countries has really influenced my motivations and where I am now. So yeah.
You've given us a bit of a insight into your globe-trotting past and how that's helped to shape your identity. So growing up, what was it like for you? Because you said that you were born in Abu Dhabi, is
Yeah.
that right? Born in Abu Dhabi, but you lived in Indonesia. So
No, I
how
didn't. I've never lived in Indonesia.
you never lived in Indonesia?
No, I'm half Indonesian, but never lived in Indonesia.
Okay. So
Yeah.
explain your transitions then from one stage to the other. How has that worked?
So from birth until I was 6, I lived in Abu Dhabi and then on and off in Aberdeen.
Right, okay.
So my dad worked in oil, so naturally you go to Aberdeen or Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And then we moved to my dad's hometown, which is in Britain, in a town outside Portsmouth.
Mm-hmm.
So we lived there for quite a long time. Then went to uni in Canterbury, then did my year abroad in Japan, and then now I'm in London.
Okay. So when you came back, when you came like as a 6-year-old, it was 6. You were 6 when you came
Yeah,
here, right?
that's it.
When you came here, what was that transition like for you at that start? If you can remember, what are some of your early memories of that transition?
Well, I remember the transition pretty well because Abu Dhabi and like England is so different. I mean, Abu Dhabi, you're literally in sand, and here you're thrown into the cold. So
Yeah.
I remember very clearly my life in Abu Dhabi, and I remember coming here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember people not understanding me
Mm-hmm.
because in Abu Dhabi, as an expat, you're exposed to lots of different people. And when I first moved here, I had this really strange accent of a British accent, American, mixed with a little bit of Indonesian and a hint of Arabic. And then no one could understand what words I was saying as a kid. So for example, I never said moon, I said mun. And I remember, because I remember saying Toy Story, I used to say, call it Story Moon.
Okay, okay, okay.
um, yeah, and people didn't understand me. And I remember coming to the UK and not experiencing like Arabic culture and Arabic. So when I was in Abu Dhabi, I would speak English. I could understand Indonesian very well and Arabic very well, and I could speak a little bit, not a lot, but I could speak a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then coming here and then being kind of shy
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't able to like I wasn't able to experience or speak Indonesian or Arabic with someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of hid that, and yeah, I wanted to fit in so much that I hid that I was my speaking ability in other languages because no one would understand me.
Right. So it was almost suppressing part of your own your cultural identity, which you had from when you were younger. But you also
Yeah.
said that you moved from Abu Dhabi to here, and then
Mm.
you went and lived in your dad's hometown of Portsmouth, was it?
Yeah, just outside Portsmouth. So yeah.
Just outside Portsmouth. And I suppose a lot of your formative education came there. How did that, again, because it's another transition, right? And I suppose in Abu Dhabi, there was, you were surrounded by a whole different culture. Then you went to Scotland, then go into Portsmouth. How was those transitions and how did that make you feel within the education environment?
In education, it's really interesting. So I remember coming into primary school in year one um, in the UK, and in the education system in Abu Dhabi, I went to a British school,
Yeah,
but I had I had 2 years prior education to
right.
year one. So you have year R1 and then you have year R2 and then you have year one.
Yeah,
Um, so when I was when I came to this country, I was actually academically bored because they would ask questions and I'd just be like this, answering all these questions because I knew the stuff from before.
yeah,
And that I honestly believe that stunted my development in education because I wasn't engaged because I
right.
knew everything and I wasn't
Yeah,
developing. And you can actually see that from how I slipped down from like the top of the class and down to the it wasn't the middle either. It was like upper middle
yeah,
because I wasn't being challenged enough.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's influenced me in that and education wise from primary education at least.
So was it a case of that you felt, apart from not being academically challenged, was there any issues about you feeling about fitting in? Because how was the interaction? Because if we're thinking about that sense of belonging,
Mm.
how did you how I know it's hard to think back to when you were 6, 7, 8 years old, but is there anything that stands out during that time?
So I remember quite well, like
Mhm.
because it is so different.
Right.
Like Abu Dhabi, everyone is different. Everyone's an expert of something, and
Hmm.
you're in like the Arab community or you're an expat, and you are mixed in all the time, and you just don't really care. And when I was in Abu Dhabi, I would hang out with all the Indonesian kids, and I
Hmm.
felt like I was at home with all the Indonesian kids, even with the British kids as well, because we hang out in the British club or in the Indonesian embassy. You
Hmm.
come into the UK, it's quite, especially this town where my dad's from, is very ethnically just majority white. It's just you when when there's someone who isn't white that comes into town, and you kind of just like wave at each other. Um, and I was I reflected on about this a few years ago, and I was very conscious that I didn't fit in at that time.
Hmm.
And I remember not wanting to be my full name, which is Suryani. I didn't want to be Suryani. I wanted to be Ashley. And I wanted to be blonde. So I would fit in with my peers. And that's when I was around 7 or 8. And I think that's so young to think that I want to be a different person. I don't want to be Suryani who's different with dark hair. I want to be Ashley who fits in and has blonde hair. And that's quite frightening for me to think about that at such a young age, and that you're so aware of who you
Mm.
are at that point.
Yeah, I still, when you say that, it's just conjures up images of, um, I'm not picturing you in a blonde wig at this moment in time, but but it's conjuring up that image of what you felt was acceptable around you, and that you felt
Yeah.
that you didn't feel that how you was going to help you to fit in to the environment. Is
Yeah.
that kind of how it was?
Yeah, I thought I would be liked more. That's the thing I thought I would be. Um, and I reflect on this actually when I had a conversation with you, and I was like, why did I want to be Ashley and why did I want to be blonde? I think it's the media that I consumed when I was a kid, and I was really into this cartoon called Recess.
Right.
Um, Loved it. And there was a group called the Ashleys, and basically they were like the popular kids, and everyone liked them. So I thought, well, if I was blonde and I was called Ashley, everyone would like me and I'd suddenly be popular and I'd fit in.
Yeah. And that's that when you think about it, children's TV does convey that message quite often, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When you think of all the popular TV shows, you always have the in group and the out group. So they do perpetuate this notion of othering,
Hmm.
and that discrimination. So,
Yeah. When I also think about this with like media that you consume, so my home life was a very much an Asian kind of home life. So a lot of it would be around Asian food, but also Asian media.
mhm,
And the thing about Asian media, it's so influenced by the Western standard. So when you think about like cartoons from Japan, particularly, it was in Indonesia is very popular too.
mhm,
They still think of that beauty standard as well as being that big doe-eyed and with
mhm,
different colored hair.
mhm.
So you're still consuming that media, and they're trying to shape yourself into that, even as like subconsciously as a child.
Yeah,
So it's on two fronts, not just the
yeah,
West, but it's also in
yeah,
Asia as well.
yeah. I won't go on. I won't go on to say what I'm thinking, but that I totally understand what you're saying. So,
Mhm.
when was it in this transition? When was it that you started to feel that you could express who you were? When was it? When did you decide that you no longer wanted to be Ashley? I might have to.
This is difficult because it's different point. When I actually wanted to be me, when I wanted to be Yani,
Yeah,
that was actually at uni. But the struggle between being Ashley to being Yani
yeah.
is a massive struggle.
Okay.
So when I was in secondary school, I finally changed my name from Suryani to Yani, purely because people couldn't say my name. It really annoyed me that people couldn't say me. They'd say my name. They'll be Suryani or Suryana, Siriani. That was the worst one. And they'd say, and some people just reduced me to Annie, and I just hated it. So when I got to secondary school with lots of different people, I was like, call me Yanni. And then that was my beginning of this Yanni identity.
Yeah,
And when you're at secondary school, you suddenly want to be different, but also you want to be included.
yeah,
So I was suddenly hyper aware that I was different, because people kept saying, you're Asian. And I was like, I am Asian because that's my mum. My mum's Asian. I consume Asian culture, my home culture, and a lot of things is Asian about me.
yeah,
And because people kept telling me that, I questioned myself, am I Asian enough or am I too white? And then I also had this conflict of um, my mum's friends who are mostly Asian saying that, Yanni, you're white. So I had this massive conflict in my mind when I was growing into secondary school of, am I too white? Am I too Asian? Am I not Asian enough? Am I not white enough? So I was trying to build this identity.
mhm,
So because I was with my friends and peers a lot, um, I tried to conform to the Asian identity on what they're based on their stereotype. So I became weirdly more Asian and adopting different mannerisms of like a stereotypical Asian culture that was not me. And that was in secondary school. Then when it came to sixth form, you become a little bit more diverse. And I made more friends in like different communities, but there was I made a lot of Asian friends at the time, and my friends from school were like, "Why are you hanging out with loads of Asian people?" And I
Mm.
was just like, "Because I'm just making friends. Like that's what it is." But they were so like othering of me. My own friends were othering me of like, "Oh, she's just being Asian," and that wasn't helpful and trying to shape that identity
Yeah.
and feeling included. But at the same time, that made me think of like, well, maybe I am Asian enough because I can sit with an Asian crowd.
Yeah.
So I just felt so not my identity was not together, but I also felt a weird acceptance.
Yeah.
And it was only until university when I really thought like, nah, I feel accepted and I feel like I can be me because at university is so diverse.
Right.
You meet everyone and you can be who you want to be, and people will accept that.
Yeah.
And it's also that mental maturity of like, why are you listening to these people and why are you trying to conform yourself to this stereotype of a box that they are living in?
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's fascinating. The fact that it was almost like on one part, some of your friends were almost trying to make you choose as to who you were. They wouldn't
Mm.
allow you to just be just be who you wanted to be. Whereas when you got to university, that space opened up for you. So I'm assuming that the university that you went to was quite diverse, or what was the composition at the kind of university that you were at? Which
It is
made go on.
it is quite diverse. So I went to University of Kent, and I actually
Yeah,
ended up working at University of Kent.
yeah,
And it is quite diverse. It's not a Russell group, so you
okay.
do end up getting a lot of people who are going through clearing,
Hmm.
and that does naturally, not
Hmm.
naturally, systemically, give diversity because of systemic racism.
Yeah,
Um, so it is pretty diverse, and yeah, you just get a grand mix of people from international students because there was a great international program. We were told that European university, so lots of people came to us, um, and a lot of people from London as well. So
okay,
it was very diverse.
okay. So in terms of you've got that diversity. How did that impact on the kind of studies that you did and then your future aspirations? Because yeah, how did that impact you?
Um, Interesting. This is interesting as well, actually. So when I was a kid, I felt like I was pressured into doing a certain job because that's what we were expected to do.
Mhm.
Like, um, they call them the Asian tiger parents, where you're told to, go into medicine or go into science because that's what is accepted. So
Mhm.
I thought I would go into like medicine or being a nurse.
Right.
And I was told this as a kid as well. I remember when I was around 5 in
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi, and someone was saying, "You're just going to be a nurse."
Okay.
And that held with me until about sixth form, that I thought I would just be something medical and being a nurse. Then I got to sixth form and I thought maybe I can do perfumeries because that sounds cool and like chemical. And that still conformed to the idea of the Asian stereotype of being into sciences, maths. So I did those subjects
Yeah.
at sixth form. But then, I'm not actually talented in that area.
Hmm.
I actually failed my first year of sixth form, and I did French, chemistry, biology, and maths.
Hmm.
Didn't like any of those, apart from biology, I loved. And I ended up changing into biology, politics, economics, and Japanese.
Okay.
And the reason why I did this was I went on holiday to Indonesia to go see my family,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of talk. I remember seeing things about you're going to a mall which has like Chanel, Dolce, really really high brand stuff, but next to it is a slum. And I'm
Hmm.
just like, why is this happening? And I started questioning these things.
Hmm.
And also in my life, my parents have always talked about social issues, about particularly around race.
Yeah.
And um, so I looked into this and I was like, well, maybe politics and diplomacy is something that would be really interesting and
Hmm.
will answer these questions and
Hmm.
further these discussions. So I started going into this journey of going down to politics. So I ended up doing politics and international relations with a year abroad in Japan,
Right. Okay.
to answer these questions about why are there disparities.
Hmm.
And through my studies at university, there was lots of things to do with identity politics, and that's really fascinating. And how is the construction of someone's identity and national identity created? And because I did a year abroad in Japan, mine was based on national identity in Japan.
Hmm.
Um, and then
Go on.
yeah,
Sorry.
that's it. And then that's influenced even to now. And now I work in EDI, which
Yeah.
is something I'm really passionate about, and particularly about the sense of belonging, hence this
Yeah.
webinar now, and inclusion.
So give me so you also mentioned about Japan. We've got so much which I still want to unpack, right? So much, right? But you mentioned about that transition in Japan. So how did that impact you when you were in Japan? So this is country number 4, I think, right? How did that impact you when you went to Japan as a Brit as a you're an Asian student, you're a British student. What are you when you get to Japan?
So, yeah, so a lot of my life has been because being the different person of exploring my Asianness
Mhm.
within a British context.
Mm.
And when I went to Japan, I was in the international house, so all of the international students get put into this dorm, which is really fun. You get to meet loads of people from around the world and make amazing friends,
Mhm.
people I still talk to today.
Mhm.
Um, and you kind of feel like you're a representative of your country.
Mhm.
So in a weird way, I became more British, and
Right.
it made me question, what does it mean to be British?
Okay.
Um, and I was like, is it because of the food that I eat? Is it my mannerisms? Is it what I watch? What makes me British? So yeah, in a weird way, I became more British because I emphasized the British parts of me,
Mhm.
like um, afternoon tea. That was a weird one that I never really explored. I actually never had afternoon tea until I was like 22. um, and exploring that and talk about cake and then about the pub culture. And
Mhm.
then I'm saying all the British stereotypes right now. And even I, ashamedly, I was known for swearing in a certain, yeah, I know. I told you I was living
Yeah,
up to the
sorry.
stereotype. I wouldn't say it, but yeah. And someone said to me, she was like, one thing that I will always remember from you is you taught me how to swear like a Brit. I was like, yeah, so I became more British and celebrating the good parts of Britain, interestingly, because also Brexit vote happened that year that I was there, and suddenly I
Oh,
became less British and more Indonesian again.
yeah, yeah, understandable.
Yeah, but even when I'm abroad, I actually never say that I'm British before I'm Indonesian
Right,
because
okay.
of that stereotype of British people being awful abroad.
Right, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So so it's kind of strange that when you went into Japan, where it was a predominant, where it is an Asian country, that your Britishness now shone forward because much of your formative experiences now had been located within the British context, no longer
yeah.
as much so as the Indonesian Asian context,
Mm.
as such. So I know that I met you about a year and a half ago, I think it is now. Was it? No, it's just maybe it's just over a year now.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's around a year.
About a year, and
Yeah.
and at the time we were having discussions about it was Black History Month, and we were doing
Hmm.
an event together.
Yeah, because I asked you to do the David Lammy
That's
event.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And and then afterwards, when we were working, now I know that you've got many talents. Right? Just to let people know, well, let's unpack the whole belonging series itself, if you've got time for that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember we were having this discussion as part of the Imperial as One committee, and we were talking about representation and what we wanted to do in conjunction. And you came up with the name Belonging for this series.
Yeah.
Can you give us some insight as to why you thought belonging?
So So I remember that we were doing the BME Early Career Research Conference,
Hmm.
and because we were meant to do this in April in person, but obviously coronavirus occurred, and we couldn't, and we had to put on pause. But we felt that we need to do this conference. We don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to do it. So we said we'll do it in September. But there was this massive gap. We were all in lockdown. We're all just feeling a bit dreary and just not great high on life right now. And we said we needed to do something to build community. And so when I was thinking about community, I was thinking about role modeling and what is it that builds our sense of community. So when I started working in my working life, I did a lot of work on building communities and the sense of belonging within students. So I thought, well, maybe if we could replicate that with the BAME community and with Imperial as one, that might be a good way to create community when we're all isolated. So I remember you put forward like, oh, maybe we should do something about like exploring in the world of academia. But I argued that maybe we should do it just open up broadly, because it's interesting to find out what is our sense of belonging within our own community. And it doesn't have to be about academia, because there's lots of different staff everywhere. There's someone in professional services, there's someone who works maybe in the kitchens, it's everyone. And what's that sense of belonging? How do we all create Imperial? And then we opened up to the world.
I remember the conversation clearly, right? And I remember us sitting round and all of us on the committee thinking, belonging, that's the name which hit. But aside from just coming up with a brilliant name, the graphics, because this is something else which you talk about, all of the inclusion and the diversity stuff, but I think people don't really recognize your artistic and graphical abilities as well.
you know
Because go on.
that came from another thing of exploring my own identity.
Okay.
So when I was 14, a friend of mine was getting really into making GIFs on Tumblr and making
Right.
graphics on Tumblr. And I was really interested in it as well. So she taught me a few things, and I learned my own things. But when I was looking for things to like, what should I make? I was thinking about things that I was interested in, my own interest, and that was to do with Japanese anime and this YouTuber
Hmm.
who talked about which kind of talked about Asian stereotypes and culture.
Hmm.
And I was at the time that I was making GIFs and graphics of him as a fan,
Hmm.
I was also exploring my own identity in that. So
Hmm.
coming like the whole exploring graphics came from a weird way of me exploring my identity as well.
Right.
So a lot of my things in my career is because I've been exploring my own identity and trying to figure out my dual heritage.
Hmm. So I'm gonna kind of like sway away from that just very quickly, because I remember you saying yesterday something about 23 and Me.
Oh yeah.
And I
um,
thought I'd bring that in. What did you do and what did it tell you?
so 23andMe has always been a really interesting thing. I mean, because it's just you just want to know as a mixed person what percentage am I and where have I come from, where have my family been from. But I was really hesitant to do it
Hmm.
because I was scared that I'd find out that I was less BAME than I was.
Hmm.
And I know that's impossible because you're 50-50 genetics. But I was like, what if I'm less BAME? What if I've been taking a space of someone and been dominating that, or this just not letting someone speak? What if I've been the problem this whole time?
Hmm.
And I was so scared of that, and I just didn't want to do it because I was like, well, what if that my identity is not what I thought it was, and I've just been really awful to everyone.
Hmm.
But it got to Black Friday last year, and I thought, you know what? Why not? It's Black Friday. It's cheap. Why not? Um, and I mean, it did confirm that yes, you're 50% white, and you're 50% Indonesian, you're 50% Asian. And I still have that question of like maybe I'm not BAME enough. But that's another discussion. But what happened in the 23andMe is that I found that I was more Chinese than I thought, and I'm actually more ethically and genetically I'm more Chinese than I am Indonesian. Something like Indonesian is like 9%, where like the Chinese side is like 20 something, 23, 24.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting discussion because my mum is actually ethnically Chinese Indonesian, but I didn't really know until I was like 15, 16. Even though like I knew from my experiences in Indonesia with my mum that people would treat her a little bit differently and just
Yeah.
say like, oh, you're not Indonesian. And she'd be like, I'm Indonesian.
Yeah.
Honestly, my mum's the proudest Indonesian woman you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I didn't really understand why. I just didn't really explore it. And then a cousin of my mum's got in touch with me, and he was writing a whole book about my mum's family and their heritage. And he sent it to me, and it was telling us about like how the family originated in a fishing village in Xiamen,
Mm-hmm.
in it's like east or south of China, and yeah, they all came from there, and they eventually moved to Indonesia, to Semarang, and then Jakarta. And I was like, Mom, we're Chinese? And she's like, yes. And I'm like, huh? And my mom actually has a Chinese name. And I just didn't know. And it's even on her birth certificate, she has the two names.
Yeah.
I was just so surprised and didn't know. So I did my own research about it, and it's about like the persecution of Chinese people back in, yeah, I
Yeah.
think 70 or something. But and they had to change their names, which was so interesting.
So your whole based on what you've said, a lot of your journey has been. It's right that you said let's unpack this, because it's all about unpacking the several different layers to
Yeah.
try to help you to understand where you are, or who you
Mm-hmm.
are, and how
Yeah.
you can be, and what.
Yeah.
So how does so I'm seeing that as being quite a big motivating factor for the type of role that you're currently in, which is kind of like a EDI specialist, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So, what would you like to see going forward? I know, it's a big question.
Is that in? Oh, this is the thing. Is like, is that in society or is that?
Right. So let's say there's another little Yanni somewhere, right? Not that there could be, but but there's another. How would you want them to be perceived? How would you want them to be related to? How would you want them to gain their sense of belonging?
I just I always talk about this, and there's someone in Imperial who gave me um, this line that I will always take everywhere because it's like that is true.
Hmm.
Um, about having a place where you can be your authentic self.
Hmm.
It's the authenticity, and I want that space where little Yanni can just be authentically them and not feeling the pressure of conforming to someone's idea of what an Asian should be or what a white person should be,
Hmm.
and just being able to like just be happy and not care
Hmm.
about that, and not feeling like they're going to be judged because they are half white or half Asian, or just
Yeah.
or whatever. That's what I hope, where someone can be their authentic self without being judged.
Brilliant. Yannick, I'm going to open up some questions to the audience. I can just carry on asking you questions, but I'm going to ask if there's anyone in the audience who has a question which they would like to ask. Your opportunity is now. I'm just putting it up. Is there any questions that are coming forward from the audience? I see Sunday.
Sunday.
All right.
Hey.
Have you got a question, Sunday, or you just looking good there?
I'm thinking because I've got deadlines, so I'm listening, but I'm like working on my computer as I'm listening. The thing is, I mean, I only met you, I don't know, at the beginning of this series, really. I don't think we've met before, but some of the things you've shared with us today, I couldn't imagine those. I just couldn't imagine some of the things you've shared with us. And basically saying thank you for sharing those with us. In terms of questions, because you're so bubbly. Every time I come on there and I see you, I thought, wow, okay, good. We're going to have a fantastic time today. And it's so good. If we had people like you, 15, 20 years ago when Imperial as one was created, we will have moved much, much faster. From what Wayne said, that you came up with the word belonging, sense of belonging. Amazing. There's a young girl, also a young lady that came up with the word Imperial as one when we created it 15 years ago.
Yes.
very, very quiet person. She just raised up her hand. What about think of all of us as one, Imperial as one, Imperial as one, and then she came out with it, and that was it. Nobody argued with her because it was so certain and it was so impactful.
Yeah.
So when Imperial as one executive were thinking a few years ago before you guys came along that they want to change the name, I said, really? Why do you want to change the name? What's wrong with them? I mean, I like change. It's good to give me a reason why you want to change. Oh, we need to rebrand. Rebrand what? You know, so that's why I managed to convince them to keep the name. So I'm so glad the name is. Well, your story, I like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Sunday. Sarah, I think you've got a question that you wanted to ask, or do you want me to ask it?
Just going to say to Yani, what was one of your favourite events that you organised during your time with us? Because you came up with lots of different things from all angles.
Does it have to be an Imperial as one? Because it is.
No.
It's okay, good. Because it is to do with race, so it's all good. It would be the Black People of Imperial stuff. If you haven't known what Black People of Imperial is, a series of portraits from students and staff, and it's kind of like candid photojournalism, where they can just talk about their experience and their identity in the portrait, the photojournalism format. Originally, that idea was actually meant to be kind of like a spin on the 56 Black Men campaign. And we were going to do about I can't remember how many it was, but it was basically how many Black students there were, British Black students at Imperial. And I was going to change that into like put a lab coat and test that stereotype of the hoodie, but with the lab coat, and really challenge people. But then I brought that to ACS, and they said like, oh, maybe we should do it just like Black People of Imperial and like celebrate that. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. So we did this whole campaign, and we got some volunteers and had these students and staff talk about their experiences, which was such a fantastic day, just interviewing and shooting everyone. It was so empowering, and hearing people's stories, and you really do feel a sense of community just from that. And that was one of my favorites. But what we did afterwards was we printed out all of these portraits, and I wanted to print out all these portraits, put them across Imperial, and be unapologetically Black. I was like, I want people to stop and say like, whoa, what's going on here? We need change. And we made a floating exhibition. And originally not many people that came, but it was the people who stopped and thought, what is this? And stopped, looked at the portrait and read the little paragraphs below. And that was the most impactful, and it was so heartwarming. And the ACS committee that I was working with, they were so thankful, and I still can't contact them today because they were a great committee, and seeing them feel like they were listened to and included is why I do the job that I want to do today, because they can feel like they're part of a community.
Can you just unpack that a little bit more for some of the listeners who don't know? So what was your role within that whole thing? Which role did you have which enabled you to make that conduit, that connection between the students and everybody? What was it that your role was?
So I worked in the student union as the project coordinator of community and transition. You're probably like, what is that role? Don't worry, most people didn't know what that role was. And that's literally just to make community and make people feel like they were included and they're part of the community. So a lot of that just coming up with projects, but working with students on projects. Mm-hmm. So in that space, I was basically project managing and kind of leading on the different things on connecting people with ACS and connecting students. So I was doing a lot of the background work, mm-hmm. And connecting everyone and basically supporting them and empowering them and making them feel excited that it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. But I think that that's such a crucial role about breaking down barriers and opening up the space. And
yeah, I'm one of those people. I have a phrase that a manager once said to me, and it will always stay with me. If there's a barrier, move it. And it's true. There's always somewhere around. Mm-hmm. I hope no one's listening that's really high up right now.
Fine, that's fine. I'm sending it to the provost later on. Don't worry.
But if there is a barrier, move it, and that's what I've been doing, and trying to empower people, because when it comes down to the protected characteristics in EDI, there are a lot of barriers, and you need to move them. And I want to be the person who moves them for that.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'm just wondering if there's any other questions. Otherwise, I've got a couple more. Okay, so as you said, your current role and your previous role is very much related to EDI development, connecting people, moving people forward, opening up the space. Can you give any examples where how you've given that example with the black people of Imperial, right, which was absolutely brilliant project. Can you give us any example where people have opened up doors for you and what it was that they've done to empower you to be where you are now?
I mean, being a co-chair of Imperial as one was definitely a door opener for me.
Right.
Because it opened my door to, it was an opportunity to be on different boards and understand what people are saying high up and making change through that way. And I learned so many skills from this. Like being a co-chair of Imperial as one really helped me in getting the role I have today, because it was all those volunteer experiences that really played a key part in getting this role. So I work for I'm an EDI partner at the General Optical Council, by the way. It really, really helped me. So that was like that was something that really opened the door for me. So I'm really thankful for Imperial as one and the people who supported Imperial as one to actually help me get to where I am. But if there was one person, there would be one person who was in Imperial College Union, and she was a manager, but she's a friend of mine, and she's a dear friend of mine now. And she gave me the tools to explore identity and student identity and formulating this sense of belonging, and kind of like suggested like maybe you are interested in this and you have all these things that you have explored, but this is a path and the tools to explore it further. And it sent me down the path and where I worked in higher education as well. And that still sticks with me today. So Emily, if you're watching, or if you watch this later, thank you so much for opening that door and finding that path to EDI and supporting me and empowering, and also being like a talking shop for me, because there's sometimes I'll get really frustrated. I'll just talk to Emily and she'd be like, it's okay. So she really did open the doors for me.
That's brilliant. That's really good to be able to find a person who you can, it's almost like a pivotal point or a pivotal person who helped to direct, and hopefully you can be a pivotal point for somebody else in the future.
Yeah, hopefully one day. That's the dream.
I think with some of the stuff which you've done already, you're definitely being an influence for a lot of people. Trust me on that. Really are. I'm going to just open the question. I've just seen one question come in. William, do you want to ask it, or do you want me to?
Yeah, because if I contextualize it. So thanks, Yani, very fascinating talk. So given, like you say, you've got like multiple identities, I wanted to ask, I suppose, what your experience was of like the idea of having a Asian identity. Because I suppose in British context, Asian identity means something quite different to like what it might mean like again like in American context, and I wonder even in a Asian context. So what does that in a sense mean to you then, the idea of what is an Asian identity? And especially I suppose given that you said like you lived in Japan, do they recognize it in the same way?
Yeah, that's really hard to pinpoint, because there is no such thing as an Asian identity. It's all because it's based on the society standard of what that country is, or what that race is. So technically there isn't an Asian identity. I guess there are little cultural habits. There's things that I'm part of like an Asian meme page on Facebook, and there's like videos that you kind of identify with a stereotype of an Asian household, like taking your shoes off at the front door.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. I remember being at uni and no one doing that, and I was just like, oh my god, what is this? And I didn't realize that was an Asian thing, and I was like, wow. And then my Asian friends were talking about this, so that's one of them. That's the only thing I can really think of. And the rice cooker. Asian families have a rice cooker. That was like a thing as well, and people get confused by that. That's another Asian identity, but also that the consuming of Asian culture, right? Interestingly, when it comes to the consumption of culture, especially in East Asia and Southeast Asia, is all dependent on Korea or Japan, and in different waves. And that's really interesting with like what the Korean government have done in soft power politics of investing in K-pop and Korean drama, and even games and culture. But there isn't really an Asian identity. It's just kind of based on culture and your consumption of different things. But honestly, there isn't. It's only based on society and society.
Can I ask a follow-up then?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How does that influence your thinking around in the British context and around BAME? Because again, BAME is like an empty vessel that gets a lot of things poured into it. So how do we understand that then when we're trying to do EDI things?
Good question.
That is a really good question. It's that element of othering and understanding why the othering is occurring. I'm trying to formulate the answer in my head, but at the same time trying to think of what it is. But it is the othering and like what is our differences, but also celebrating our differences and why there is another. I hope that answered that. I was a bit.
No, I think this is going to be a discussion that we can have in a little bit more depth afterwards, if that's all right. Because it's a very good question about when you've got heterogeneous populations, which we're then trying to make homogeneous by specific terms, you're always going to get conflicts within the heterogeneity because there is no homogeneity. If that makes sense, because it's not a homogeneous thing. There's you can't define who I am because that's not who I see myself as. Makes sense. All right. So no, I'm just upset that we haven't got more time. All right. And we've effectively come to the end of our time. But anyone who wants to stay on and have a little bit of a chit chat afterwards, then we will do that. But Yani, as you know, as far as I'm concerned, you're one of my rocks, because you've taught me so much in that short space of time that we've been together, and I think I just want to give you a big thank you for being so willing to come on and share your experience, and your quest for identity and everything like that. And I know that you're going to excel at whatever you do, because you've done, I've seen, it's been brilliant. So I just want to say a big thank you once again for coming on. And
thank you to you for inviting me back. It's actually really wonderful that at the beginning of the last lockdown we started this journey, and then I did leave Imperial, unfortunately, but now I'm back at the start of the second lockdown as a guest. That's so lovely, and you know, it's lovely to talk to everyone as well and come back and talk to and just celebrate. I mean, I come up and ever so often onto belonging anyway, because I feel like belonging is one of my babies still, so I want to see it.
No, I agree with that exactly. I think that's a brilliant I hadn't even thought of it like that, but yeah, you're 100% right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, as is my usual custom, I'm going to just highlight what we've got coming up next week. Again, just to say a big thank you to Yani. But next week we've got a special edition.
Wow.
We're looking at the I Can't Breathe project with Mervyn Weir and Marge Malcolm. It's a very exciting project. I would encourage you to go and have a look at the video which they've put together before next Friday, because it will help to put into context some of the discussion that we'll be having next week. And again, if you haven't been able to catch up with or see some of the videos or see some of the talks, then you can go to our YouTube site where you can catch up on all of the former interviews. And Yanni's one should be going up there very soon. Okay, so all I can say is thanks once again for coming out, and for those who are listening from a distance, come and join us sometime. All right, it would be really good to have you on here with us. So once again, I want to just say a big thank you, and I'll see you again next week.
Thank you.